Welcome. It is 6:02. We will call our meeting to order. All right, we have no one for our open forum today, so we will jump over that agenda item. The next item on our list is our board calendar, which was part of our packet. Did we have anything to add to that, John, or anything? Anybody have a comment on that? I believe we will be discussing February meetings, a work session, as well as a early February board meeting or a mid-February board meeting. But that will be coming up a little bit later in our learning model transition plan.
Yep, and then also on January, we do have approved the school calendar. So Stillwater did approve their calendar at their last meeting. And so we can do that at our next meeting, have that prepared and ready to go as well. So that will be a part of that. So.
All right. Excellent. So everything else there looks good. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda.
Okay, this really is the board minutes from January 7th.
Yes, sir.
And so a summary of that. And then from the executive director's report, just want to highlight a couple things. We did conduct the lottery for the 2021-2022 school year. And so all the offer letters and wait lists have been established for that. And we've done a couple things. We did have our first COVID-19 employee testing on Monday. I think we had 80 or so sign up, 88, and we had all but 3 show. So those that's part of the mitigation strategy. So we'll offer that again in another 2 weeks. So that was a success. And then also from a vaccination perspective, we did receive an allotment of 4, and then based on an announcement yesterday, and then also Candace is doing the follow-up work as we speak, but we have been allotted 60 doses for educator testing, which will occur at the XL Energy Center or Roy Wilkins Center. That'll be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we have 60 people that are being communicated with as we speak about scheduling. It is a first come, first serve sort of thing, but we have 60 that we can throw into the loop. So we are proceeding with that actually as we're talking right now. So, and we've done the allocation. People are sometimes curious how we've done the allocation. It's based on those with underlying health conditions. And then based on the recommendations from MDE and MDH, it's those that are servicing students that are in the school presently, and those then that will be in the future, and then also based on age. So that's how we've done that. But with the allocation of 60, we're getting through a lot of people very quickly. So that's good news. So then just the items from Chad, I got a quick question from somebody asking if the link is indeed correct, because they can't log in.
I'll check on that.
Or they're in the waiting room. So
it looks like it should be the correct link, because it looks like there's 36 people attending at the moment. So
okay, so that's it for the consent agenda.
All right, and then that when we talked about the percentage of faculty receiving the COVID allotment or the vaccination allotment, I noticed, so if they refuse to get the vaccination, they do count towards the fulfillment, correct? I mean, it's 55% receiving the vaccination or refusing. Is that how it worked?
Correct, but yes. So we have gone through some and some have refused, but then we're proceeding on. But by the end of this, we should have close to 55% of our staff that have been at least started on that vaccination process.
Okay. Great. All right. So looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Deb, second. Excellent. All right. Any further? And Susan, was it Drew that made the motion? Okay. Nobody popped up on my screen, so, all right. So any further discussion or
Wasn't
comments?
it Jake?
What's that? Oh,
Wasn't
was it Jake?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Welcome. Hi. All right, so Jake and Deb seconded. Are any further comments or discussion on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
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 And opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, moving on. The next item on our agenda is the board election process, and I believe Ms. Donay was just going to discuss this or present.
Yes, so in your board packet, we have the board election update. This is the similar format that we use every year. So I just went ahead and changed all of the dates to match what we would need them to be for this year. So the election will be held on May 18th. The board nomination forms will be included in the parent update on February 11th. And then as we go on, there'll be the turn-in dates and the voter's guide throughout April. That's basically it. Short and sweet.
Okay.
Sorry, I muted myself. Talking away. All right, so did any, we don't have to do anything to approve this. Did anybody have any questions or comments regarding the work done on the election? No? All right, great. Thank you. All right, so our next item is the learning model transition plan. And John, were you going to introduce this?
I think Kelly, you
Kelly?
were,
Kelly?
or do you want me?
Okay.
I have it. Am I off mute? I
Yep,
am.
you are off mute.
Great. So where we have come since January 11th is the the board appointed return to school committee was asked to bring back a solid recommendation for an aggressive return to school. And where we're at in that is it's a work in progress. It's complicated, and this approved recommendation is contingent on our meeting with the regional support team approval, an approval with the regional support team. And we have our meeting on February 10th. So we are asking for a little bit of grace here, and because we want to do it well, and we've chosen a sophisticated, complicated approach. So tonight we're just making a recommendation, and I take it back. We are presenting a work in progress and are open to your feedback and bringing it back to the table, but asking that we could continue to work on this for another week and perhaps meet with you next week and be prepared for a solid recommendation at perhaps a special board meeting coming up, if you would be so kind as to schedule that. So does that make sense?
Yep. To help frame this from just since we started this, when we first entered this school year, all the emphasis was on county case rate data. That's really the plan that was introduced by the governor in late July. And so everybody was really focused on case rate data. Then near the end of October, the first part of November, there was you heard the term scalpel approach, which means they wanted schools to start considering some things other than just case rate data. So with the announcement of the governor's intent to get the youngest learners back into school as quickly as possible, he in essence took case rate data out of the equation and said that they could come back in person as long as we had additional mitigation strategies in place. And some of that include the employee testing and some of the things that we're doing now. So, but with that, grades 5-12 is subject to the Safe Learning Plan, which is case rate driven, or the plan that the board approved in November, which is case rate driven. So we've been encouraged to, or have the option to look at transition plans, which include other things besides case rate data. And so not only have that option, but have been encouraged to do that because it reflects more of our school data. So I think that's where Kelly put some work in place, and you see some different things there that we can stress test and come back to the board with.
Yeah, so we had met, as a return to school committee, we merged with the COVID response team, which is our administrative team. Candace, John, and our facility, food service, basically our administrative team, to we merged them, so we have 2 parent board members, 2 parent or staff / parent board members now working together on this. And our first decision was, do we want to continue with the very quantitative approach that we selected in the fall process with our learning model transition plan? And that was, as John said, completely case rate driven, or largely materially case rate driven, or for the most part case rate driven? Or do we want to move to more of a qualitative approach that we've seen in many districts use that approach versus firm metrics? It was decided that we would like to continue with the quantitative approach, and that has is labor intensive. It takes a great deal of thought and work. So we have been in the process of doing that as a committee and have made strong progress. You saw a summary of where we are at, or where it's at in process, in your board packet, but we'd like to continue to work on that and fine tune the metrics to make them the most meaningful for our school, to more meaningfully reflect what is safe for our students and our staff to continue teaching. So that's really where we're at with those metrics. The items that we are considering weighing are, I'm just going to pull up my notes here, are the primary metrics that we're considering is the percent of COVID cases in the school. So in the middle and upper school. And again, this is just applies to 5-12. So we'd be measuring the percent of positive cases is the metrics we're strongly considering. Also, because the regional support team has strongly emphasized the importance of mitigation efforts, we are constructing a one-time unannounced inspection of safety protocols, and we're in the process of developing that that tool to evaluate how well the school population is adhering to the safety protocols. So that is a work in progress. And we would like Washington case rate data to still be a component. And current state restrictions is also being considered, so as a reflection of just how much virus is out in the community and as a bit of a indicator. So we will be fine tuning that, consulting more with our staff and what their priorities are to make them feel comfortable. We are also consulting obviously with the parents on the committee to get their input, and with our end goal of getting a plan that gets our kids back to school safely. Is there any questions about where we're at in this process?
Any questions from anybody who hasn't participated in any of the committee meetings? None?
So
I'm going to ask a quick question. So, Kelly, this looks like a really good framework. I
Mhm.
understand it's a work in progress. We've done work in progress before. I understand what that means, that it's not finished, but it is a beginning point to help the conversation move forward.
Mhm.
And you said that your next steps would be looking at parents, consulting with staff. What else?
um, really telling what are our important metrics to consider. We feel like this framework right now reflects more of what we should be measuring. We
Mhm.
also are considering, and others who are on the committee and present here can chime in, but we're considering just the percentage of people who are out of the building, either on quarantine or sick with COVID, if that's an indicator, because at some point, that's when we're begin to be unable to function well as a school and a learning community. So,
I have a quick question. I have a quick question. So I had gotten a few questions about if teacher vaccinations and staff, EAs, all everyone that works at prep, if the vaccinations would play any part
mhm,
getting kids back to school, or could that be a part of the model, or does it make sense to add that in
mhm,
now that we're getting more staff vaccinated?
mhm. I think definitely we have that on our list as well to add to possibly a metrics.
Has the state given any indication whether it's MDE or MDH, even if in the next month, let's say we're able to get as close to 100% vaccination of staff, um, you know, assuming like we've got that second dose in, if they would leave the restrictions in place as far as hybrid for instance, upper school, or have they said that once a staff is vaccinated, then they're comfortable pulling back the
Mhm.
requirements that are currently in place for
Mhm.
secondary?
We have not received any indication that I'm aware of. John's been on more of the MDH, MDE calls than I have.
Yep. No, I'll let Candace comment on this as well, but no, we haven't received any indication of that. Right now, we're just trying to roll out the vaccinations, so they haven't given any indication as to if they would change restrictions or anything like that.
Mhm. And just to give a sense of how much this is changing every day is the fact that we got 60 vaccines awarded yesterday catapulted us from about 5% of our population vaccinated to 55% of our school population. And that it's just evolving very, very quickly. And as was the call on January 4th. So we went into the Christmas break with the understanding per the safe learning plan that our learning model transition plan that we had approved in the fall is what we should be using as our guide until further information is provided to us or further guidance. Went on our call on January 4th, and it was strongly emphasized that we focus on mitigation efforts in the school. How well are you managing the virus in the school? How well are you able to do school with in the midst or short of having a vaccination? Or so that's where we turn to make this a more meaningful measurement of what type of learning model to implement.
Yep. Candace, have you heard anything else on the vaccines?
Just no, they've not said anything about, they've kind of indicated that the mitigation layers will need to stay in place. Which ones, or if it's all of them, those kind of things they haven't detailed out, but because of the way the vaccine works, that it keeps you from getting sick, but not necessarily from you from making others sick, a lot of those things are going to stay in place for now. As far as the vaccine allotments that we've gotten, we have people in line right now. It's not a guarantee. Even though we were given 60 slots, they are sitting on their emails right now waiting to get in, and some of them have like 10,000 people in front of them.
Got it.
So.
Okay.
So it could be a different story tomorrow.
Right. So maybe not 55%.
Mhm. Is there anything else those on the committee would like to say of where we're at in the process of developing the updated learning model transition plan?
The only thing I would add is, I think where we go from here is just making sure all, when this does come back to be presented, that we're really looking at things that can get executed, right? Those actionable items that can be executed with everybody,
Mhm,
aware of how to execute them, right? So when we're talking about those mitigation strategies, or the portion where we have the inspection, what would be a weekly inspection, I think we just need clarity on some of those
mhm,
details. What's going to be looked for, and
mhm,
what are the metrics and how is it going to be measured, and
mhm,
so the framework I think is there, but I think the committee can do a lot to look at what can be executed.
mhm. And we haven't shared those details. um, We're still finalizing the details, but I can tell you that we have consulted with a building safety consultant who is doing a great deal of COVID safety mitigations in facilities around the cities. It's consulted with him, and also Eagle Ridge Academy, who is implementing a similar plan. And so we're sharing ideas, and they've shared their plan with me today that I can bring with the committee tomorrow. So it's definitely something that clearly has to be meaningful, or it's just another meaningful number that you make it do what you want to do.
Right.
I
And
want it to
then
be
just
impactful.
to add, I mean, continuing to look at what's meaningful for this school, right? Because this
Mhm.
school is different than, all the other plans and all the other schools and what they're doing. We have
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
unique situation with the K-12 building, and I think it's
Mhm.
great that the committee has all the people on it that I think can help carry the plan forward. So I think that part's comforting.
Mhm. And we have been spending a good deal of our time these past 2 weeks identifying what it would take to separate this building into 3 separate areas that could be isolated to comply with the regional support team's guidance that we can return kids more than 3 grades at a time if we're able to isolate grades more than 3 coming together. So if we were to do a 5-6 and a 9-10, those 2 divisions need to be separated to justify, or for the regional support team to be in support of us bringing more than 3 grade levels at a time back. So we're identifying that. I've shared a lot of that detail with you. So hopefully you can take some time to read that to understand the complexities of actually executing on that. But it is doable.
Great, thank you. Did anybody else have any questions?
No,
Or did we-
I'll just add really quick too. One of the things that we talked about was in developing this, thinking about what makes sense to have as factors. And right now, the focus, I think, of the plan is a lot on safety, within the building in terms of COVID. But there isn't really, I guess, a factor of the impact on kids and not turning back. And so really kind of thinking holistically about this with the example of like the safety controls and adherence to policies. I think we've seen across the country that transmission isn't happening really in schools. And so the weight that has in the metric, how much weight that should have, even though we know it doesn't transmit really in schools. So just keeping all those in mind, I think, are important, but there's a lot of people involved. I'm sure we will.
Mhm.
Yep. Good point.
Yes, great point. All right. All right, so no more questions on that one, then we can go ahead and discuss the learning model timeframes for middle school and upper school.
Okay, I think that's me. I'm just going to walk through, I think, just kind of a summary of um, what we've done. This was the work of the COVID-19 response team and the board committee related to school opening meetings on January 13th and January 20th. Some of the things we have agreed upon, and it's on the grid that we have, is K2, which has started already, and it's good to see the kids in school and in classrooms. They started on the 25th, and then we will move grades 3 and 4 in on February 8th. So that was approved by the board, and it's part of the transition back into school. Some of the mitigation strategies are 3 grades at a time with 2-week intervals in between, and that's to have some sort of cohort to measure how the transition is going in, if there's COVID cases, those types of things. So that is the first step and the part of this implementation. One of the things that the committee and response team have emphasized is we really want to give focus to the governor's emphasis on protecting that lower school environment, that K4. So even though it was alluded to that we could potentially do some additional grade implementation if we could separate the building, the committee has at least recommended that we would like that 2-week space in between so that we know that K4 is up and running and learning, and we're protecting that environment. The last thing that we want to do is to go back and forth between learning models. So that is a part of that process. With that, then what we do is we get to the February 22nd, and as we heard in the regional support team call, and as we are continuing to plan, we were trying to figure out the details related to having the divisions operate as separate buildings. That is a little bit more difficult than meets the eye, because we are in only one building. And so some of the areas where we really have to focus on are the lunch, recess, gym, some of the study hall things. So we are making progress on that and continue to just address some of the nuances related to that. So that'll be a part of this continued planning that we do. The goal in this, I would say that the emphasis here that we have is this would be like the low bar that we want to achieve. So on the low side, what we want to do on February 22nd, it's subject to progress, regional support team, just a plan that can be approved. We would like to move on February 22nd to the grades 5 and 6. And then grades 9 and 10 in the hybrid model. And then 2 weeks later to bring in grades 7, 8, grades 11, 12 in the hybrid model. And then in person beginning on March 22nd and April 5th. From a technical perspective, in person as defined by MDE, when you get to March 22nd, in person is actually 5 days a week. But in this case, we would probably retain and still stay with hybrid 4 days a week. So 4 days in person, and then that 1 day of distance learning and so on, just as the schedules are for middle school and upper school. So in any event, by March 22nd, the effort will be to have in-person learning. The keys with this, at least what we want to do is, with a plan that we have that we're going to continue to develop as a team, and with our regional support team meeting on the 10th, what we'll be able to deliver to the regional support team is the plan that this board will have a chance to have looked at and developed, and will have had feedback with from the different stakeholders. Then we will have the data related to the rollout of K2 and partially grades 3, 4. We'll have information and data related to the rollout of Minnesota State High School League activities. We will have additional case rate data and also data related to other school openings. So the idea is on February 10th is to take that information to the regional support team and then present as a minimum, if all is as we are hoping that it would be, that grades 5, 6, and 9, 12 on February 22nd can return in a hybrid model at a minimum. So if we're in a position where we can say that we would like to bring them in person, or some of them in person, or a different combination of grades, 5, 6, 7, we want to be able to do that. So in this, and Drew has said this, I think, at the last board meeting, this is our decision. We consult with the regional support team. The thing that we press on is to make sure that our recommendation implementation does not cause the regional support team to put our name on the commissioner's watch list. So that's the goal of that. But this is the framework that we have, and I think that's probably all I have on that. Questions, comments? I think you guys have seen this a few times, but and I think we probably need to, with that, I think with the regional support team on, and with our data, the regional support team on the 10th, we have a working session. I think that we're going to try to propose for next week, I think on the 2nd. Then we would need to have another board meeting, and it doesn't seem like the 11th would work out, but the 16th could work out, so we can actually move through and make that final determination and approval of the rollout based on the data we have.
All right. Did anyone else have any comments on that?
Yeah, I had a quick question. If we move forward with a proposed meeting on the 16th, does that alter any timeline for those transition days that we might need to use? And would we still be able to give families enough of a heads up that those might still be coming if we don't approve it until the 16th?
We would like to ask for a special board meeting on February 11th, which would give a bit of a less than 2-week notice. So there would have to be an exception to that, but that's when it would be versus the 16th.
And I think the issue with when John said the 16th was Krista and I both have conflicts with the 11th.
Oh, okay.
And so,
but I think
up to speed on that one.
Yep. So I think, but even with the communication, even now we can say this is the plan, the tentative plan. These are the expectations. So we can continue to communicate this with families so that they know that when we get to that time on the 16th, we could have transition days beginning as soon as the 17th, or it could be the 18th, 19th. So I think we can build that in with the communication plan so that it doesn't surprise people.
right.
And what was discussed is that we would essentially make a motion to approve this conditional on compliance with the updated learning plan. And so that way the plan would be those days. And if, it doesn't comply, then there'd be adjustments. But
Right.
I think the assumption is the hybrid at least would comply. The big question will be more about the in-person versus the 4 days a week days.
Correct.
Right. All right. Additional questions on that? None? And I believe, Drew, were you going to make a motion?
He's missing. I wonder if he got disconnected. I can make the motion for him. Okay, let's see. Hopefully I get it right. Kelly, correct me. I think I got it. I think I got it from updated. So I'll make a motion that we adapt the proposed timeframes to move 5 and 6 and 9 and 10 to hybrid on the 22nd, 7, 8, and 11 to 12 to hybrid on the 8th, and then the 22nd and 5th as outlined in the plan conditional on its compliance with the final approved learning plan. With the transition days of, was it the 17th, 18th, and 19th we had in it?
I believe
Yeah,
that.
17th, 18th, and 19th for the
Mhm.
transition planning days.
All right. I will second that. All right, any discussion, questions?
Yeah. As far as the subject to the other conditions we were previously discussing,
Mhm.
you know, for just a few things, I guess. Are we agreeing right now, because the 9, 10, for instance, the 9, 10, 11, 12, there's been some discussion in the upper school when we look at, getting to that point of transition back, that, there might be a want to get 11, 12 back first. So when we're voting on this right now, are some of those details still up for, further discussion, with teachers and further discussion with principals and stuff like that? How far are we going with this?
I would say definitely so, unless anyone strongly objects. But I would just like to add that the recommendation came from the principals pretty strongly for various reasons, that the 5, 6 students and the 9, 10 students are newest to those divisions, so they're going through the most transition. And in particular, the 6th grade and 10th grade spent a third of their first year in transition in distance learning. So that was the initial thought, but as we're fine tuning this, that I don't see any reason why that couldn't be amended. I do know that parents like to plan, and but a big intention was to give them as much notice as possible.
So the goal here is to get these tentative dates a little bit more formal space on the calendar.
Correct.
Mhm.
I mean, right, correct.
Do others feel strongly that you would like us to look into the grades that have been recommended by the administration?
Well, do we want Amy and Andrew to speak up on this at all, or?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to have to talk, John.
Sorry.
You look good, Andrew.
Hello, Andrew.
Hey, thanks. Good evening, everyone. There's a real strong argument to make there for what Jake is talking about, getting our seniors, especially, kind of back into some sort of sense of normalcy. So I could be either way, whatever works. I'm pretty open to just getting them back all as safely as possible. So it'll be awkward because we have kids that cross over, obviously, that, there are some classes with 11th and 12th graders in it, but we'll figure that out.
Amy?
Hi, I would say the same thing about 5th and 6th grade and 7th and 8th. You could argue both sides, but my original proposal is true to what Kelly said. 5th and 6th grade are our littlest buddies in middle school, and 5th grade, our current 6th graders only had half a year, and 5th grade 2 this year, and we know 5th grade is really important transitioning into middle school. So that's what the original proposal came from.
Yeah, I think we talked about this during the committee, because 11th and 12th, I think, was pretty high on the priority list, because it's their last year and last year. And so with them particularly, I think the feedback we had heard from staff was that they thought 9 and 10, maybe, I don't want to say how can you judge who needs it more, but I think I remember the reason they had said 5 and 6 was because it was the transition to the multi-period. They didn't have any time in that new schedule and stuff. But I would be more than open to, I guess, a friendly amendment to change it to be 5th and 6th and 11th and 12th. Because I've heard from a lot of parents about 11th and 12th. I think that having them before 10th and 11th would be better if the board agrees to swap those.
And I only really bring it up just not wanting to make a vote and then having to have that be formalized, and then now we have to like undo something because of a vote we did tonight. So I was really wanting just clarity on, you know, when this vote happens, is it final or are we still considering some of those changes?
So do we want to make somewhat of an amendment to say that further evaluation of 9, 10, 11, 12, unless this gets cast in stone, or doesn't matter to me how we do it?
2 high school
Let's make
grades.
further evaluation so that there's some discussion, so we don't have to decide tonight without some key players putting in their input. I don't think it would be wise to have the board members discuss it. I think it would be wise to have the most key players who really work with these students and teachers and staff members make the decision, not the panel sitting on here. So let's put it as with further discussion on the evaluation of which of those 2 grades would be the best.
My understanding though is that already happened. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was what you already did. You discussed with them, they gave you feedback on which grades should come back. They said 9 and 10. And so that already happened. So if we're as a board wanting to change what they've already gave feedback and said could do, that's what we'd be doing right now. But they already said 9 and 10 is who they think should go back.
That's accurate, that was the recommendation. If we had the latitude, to change it, I'm concerned that, you know, the court of public opinion, we're going to have 120 11th and 12th grade parents petitioning us for that grade. And so that
I think the original,
a good amount of energy.
the original conversation, if I'm recalling correctly, was just trying to get those kids with the least experience kind of just moving forward. I feel like the general rollout from the state and all the recommendations kind of just added this idea or the notion that we'd be rolling out youngest to oldest. And so I think if we have a strong, you know, rationale, just like for those seniors and that experience, I would be in favor of that. And you know, faculty members on the high school can speak to that too, I suppose.
Could we do 9 and 12? So we hit both buckets, the ones that are, you know, the newest and then the ones that are leaving?
I think that creates some crossover issues because more 11th and 12th graders share classes. Am I accurate, Andrew?
I mean, yeah, we could look at this a few different ways for sure and make good arguments as to why.
Okay.
I don't have a good response for you right now.
Okay, so should we go with what Deb said and then say subject to, you know, upper schools further evaluation, final recommendation? I mean,
I don't think so, because our next meeting is going to be what, a week before? I mean, I think the goal of this was we would have 2 grades identified, announced, planning for, and that way everybody could plan. I mean, I think leaving it vague when we've already had it vague and given that time and gotten feedback. I think parents, they want to know like what, I mean, it's not going to be the ideal, but they'd rather know this is the plan than it be, we're not sure what's going to happen more.
yep, that's fair.
But there's a lot of information that we're still sussing out in these next few weeks. A lot of, you know, parts, I mean, the committee itself is meeting again, it sounds like next week. And so I think I would imagine that for all the people involved in the upper school, you know, further evaluation for all 4 grades is providing equity to the decision. And so it's not saying further evaluation for just 1 grade. It's saying that, you know, further discussion on these 4 grades should be included. And, you know, maybe parent involvement in that could be a factor as well.
All right. I mean, I am comfortable with allowing the upper school administration and faculty kind of guide us on that.
I would also like to, I mean, I think we have some in the chat here about parents consulted. I want to give parents a heads up, and I want to hear what, maybe I'm missing something as far as bringing this back together. So, I mean, just give me a minute to maybe open that conversation up and get some feedback from them as well.
So maybe the amendment could be the 2 grades that are included in upper school will be identified with upper school staff and announced by the 5th or something. That way people still have that time, but they have some time to figure it out. Yeah, I see it. Okay.
Would we want, if we're doing that for upper school, do we want to also do that for middle?
I don't think that conversation is the same for middle because with the seniors, it's just not the same situation. I think with middle, I think it's been pretty, I mean, unless I haven't heard any case for like anybody email about 7th, 8th as much as seniors, it's their last year. So the case has been pretty strong for them to come back as soon as possible.
That's fine.
Yep.
All right.
I also agree with having the upper school figure that out together, and then I don't know if that needs to be board approval if we don't make it, what grades get picked, because I also have a concern about not giving notification until that board meeting the week right before that school is supposed to start for those grades. So I'd like the decision to be out sooner than the 16th on what those grades are going to be.
It shouldn't be an issue to delegate that out to admin. Right? We know we're going to bring back 2. So
just a friendly amendment to have them announce that. I don't know how to word it.
I'll make a friendly amendment that the admin team will decide which 2 grades will be coming back on the first date.
Kristen, if I'm hearing you right, it's more about communication and preparation, making sure people understand this is what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Do that as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So I don't know how much time, but I mean, I would think if we're saying the 22nd, if upper school could have that shared in the update by the 5th, that way there's a couple weeks and people know what the plan is.
Yep, I think that's fair. Maybe we'll try to get together some, we'll get together some information as soon as possible and then aim for a sooner than later date. Did we pick a date in this at all to have this decision made by and out and communicated?
Communicated by the allotment. Would that work, John?
I think it was the 5th, wasn't it?
The 5th.
5th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So
okay.
Friendly amendment that the admin team will pick the 2 grades for the upper school, and that announcement will be made at the 5th, by the 5th.
Did you get that, Susan?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry. All right. So any further comments, discussion on this?
Can I ask a question of?
Sure.
And in the way that I'm looking at this, it seems as if, you know, what we just discussed in this learning model, the rolling out of the dates, that those 2 things are tied together. You know, it seems, if for some reason, you know, at the working session next week, that not that I see this happening, but that learning, you know, transition model kind of falls apart and we have to revert back to the one that's already in place. Well, that could alter these dates that we're looking at, right? So would it not make sense just to if we're planning on having a working session next week anyway, to fine tune and to kind of approve what that transition model will be? Would it not make sense to also tie this to that?
No, because then nobody would be going back to anything until, I mean, March, maybe, because that means that a decision wouldn't be made until mid to late March,
Right.
or we'd be giving people very last minute decisions. And we agreed at the last meeting, we would kind of have a plan, and families need time. And we're already with this current plan going to be behind, I think, our peer districts on some of the grades.
Why would this mean that we would not be able to give an answer until March?
Because we wouldn't, not an answer, but an actual transition, because the next meeting wouldn't be for then, I think February 16th. And we'd want to presumably have to set transition days, give notice. And so we'd be looking at March then.
Does that answer your question, Christoph?
I mean, if we're planning on having a meeting next week, then we would still be able to meet that 5th deadline for announcing new grades, and then potentially we could roll out the entire package. So to me, it doesn't seem prudent to separate the two when they're going to be tied together in execution. So
I think part of it is that the plan was going to be drafted, but also at the RST call on the 10th, where the question was going to be, one, here's kind of what we're thinking, but also, is this the right way to consider things? The quantitative approach, the having the, very prescribed plan that guides things, because that doesn't seem to be what people are doing anymore. And that, I think it's in large part because of the bigger question of how bad is this impacting kids compared with what we know about the risk and the impacts in kids now. And so that's going to be part of, I think, one of the questions to the RST is we're going to work on this plan, but also, should this be what we base so much decision on, and how much qualitative feedback, community feedback should be in that too?
Good point. You're shaking your head, Christoph?
I just want to note that we're talking about a working session on,
Right.
it's a technicality, but a working session next week. And so there would be no board actions taken.
Right.
That is a minor point of this.
I think part of what Christoph is saying, and I'm seeing the where two things are kind of missing here. We kind of started off noting that the transition plan, although a solid framework, it still needs work to be effective. And so, I guess I would like to hear people speak on what that would mean to transition without a transition plan. I mean, essentially the two things have to be tied together. And so that work next week in that committee to get that transition plan up and running, I mean, is critical. But that would also mean that that plan has to be up and running in order to actually make the transition, right?
And there's a contingency on the motion that Kristen brought, and maybe Drew or Kristen, could you speak to the importance of the motion? Because it is indeed contingent on the transition plan that isn't finalized. So what's the point?
Yes, yeah. The whole, what we kind of talked about was, so with the plan, so part of it is kind of the questions I brought that I kind of pointed out with the factors and what factors should be considered and what should guide that change. But the motion, the plan is contingent on its alignment. And so, for example, say next week we meet at the work session, we have our call with the RST on the 10th, and they're like, big shift again, only county case rate data. And that was the only thing we could look at. Well, then we would have to, then that contingency would come into play, and we'd have to announce, okay, RSC said this now, so this, we have to follow this. And then we would have to announce that then, that day or the next day. But based on the meetings with the RST, that isn't going to happen. I mean, the RST is already, we could be sending kids back next week. I mean, we could be sending kids back all in person versus hybrid. And so that isn't going to be likely what they say. And so the point of this is to kind of get those preparatory steps in place so that everybody is prepared, have this plan, but get input from, more staff, from families, from the community, figure out what these factors should be with guidance also from the RST to see, how prescribed that should be, if that aligns with what they're saying as well. Because based on the last call, what we have doesn't align now anymore with what they're recommending. And so that's why this is conditional on it, but it also is providing everyone that time to plan, because this is the direction that everyone is moving, that we're going to be moving, and the community is moving in. And so it's about preparing, but also having that contingency so that, if something crazy happens, or if something big changes, it's there.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, my mic wasn't working earlier. My 2 cents on it has been create as much certainty as humanly possible, as early as humanly possible. In the conversations I sit in with the college universities going through this with MDE and MDH, the more confident and more planned out they are in their approaches, the more MDE and MDH say, well, sounds like you got a plan, keep going. And really, and like I've said on our last call, the way John has been talking to MD and MDH of, this is our plan, this is what we're testing, what do you think? Does this put us on any bad lists? Yes or no? And you know, as long as we're hearing those, the confidence of our plan is where we're heading. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of contingencies that need to go into this, right? But the more we can say, this is where we're going, there, it's dependent on these to be named contingencies, which is I think a lot of the work that has to be done in the next 2 weeks. But then by that call with the RST, we're saying, this is our plan and it's based on these contingencies, but assuming these contingencies are good, we're moving forward and this is happening, right? So I think that is more of create as much certainty as we can now, and being transparent with everyone on what those contingencies are and what they have to be, because staffing's a real one, right? But we can say the goal is to bring back these 4 grades, assuming that all we have staffing to do it, right? And if we don't have staffing to do it because of COVID, then I think families will understand that. But they'll also feel better knowing that we said we were planning to do this, rather than saying, well, we're not even going to plan to do it because we believe the case rate is going to go up, right? I think that's 2 different ways of looking at it, and we're trying to just create more certainty.
Thank you.
Yeah, great point. Thank you, Drew. Right. Did you have any other questions, Christoph? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm right there with you, Drew, on, you know, I think getting these dates out there is an important step, and the fact that we're even at a point where we can talk about, you know, getting, like, where we're having this conversation of which grades are we bringing back, is one that, you know, back in November, December was, you know, one that seemed years away. So the fact that we're here, I think, is a really encouraging sign. I guess my big concern is with what seemed to be some uncertainty left around what that transition model and which factors we are going to factor in. It sounded like the committee's recommendation was to keep it quantitative, and yet, Kristen, I'm hearing that you're saying that you want to bring more qualitative things into the mix now. So if in this transition between, you know, the meeting tonight and next week when it's a working session, all of a sudden now we're focusing on more qualitative factors, I think that you know, changes the conversation. It changes the tone. It doesn't, I don't think, affect the fact that we would still have this goal of, you know, trying to get to the 22nd and trying to get to what's the, you know, that early day in March. But I don't see how we can approve one without the other. I'm really struggling to make that connection, because to me they come hand in hand.
Well, I would just say that to do a purely quantitative thing, I think, is a really difficult thing when you're talking about, one, something that's unprecedented. 2, we cannot really account for all the variables in it, and 3, you know, if we did it on a purely quantitative model, the governor technically could never have made the decision he made to say, okay, well, I'm just bringing back this group. Like, forget the data for this group, right? So I think to make it purely quantitative would be really difficult, and I'm supportive of a more qualitative model. There needs to be some data in there, right? And I think the case, our community case data, really should be the biggest factor driving that. And I think that to me would be the big quantitative piece that I'd ask us to enforce and endorse locally, because I think that's the thing that's going to get people the most nervous as well. The second piece of it is the vaccination data, right? I mean, the vaccine and how it's progressing, and as we see more data around that, we will probably need to take the quantitative piece of that, and if the case data or the vaccine data shows it's really effective as we go on, we'll put more and more emphasis on it, right? If the vaccine data shows it's not as effective, then we'll put less and less case effectiveness on that. So I think even in a qualitative model, we would end up changing our scoring models or matrix, I think, every other week if we try to go more quantitative than qualitative. I think at the end of the day, what I'd love for us to be able to do is go to every single faculty and staff and say, do you feel safe right now? And if we can get more yeses, or everybody saying yes, I feel like you're doing everything you can to keep me safe, that would make me happy. And I think that would be what I would be pushing us to get to.
Great, thank you for clarifying, Drew. Right. Did you have another question, Christoph? Or sorry, you just popped up on my screen, so I didn't know if you were.
Oh, I just muted myself, but
okay.
I don't have any other questions. I'm just again, I got to see a lot of this a couple days ago because I'm not on that committee, and so I guess I'm a little surprised to hear from people who were on the committee that now that they're pushing for more qualitative factors, because again, the what we have in front of us, what we discussed earlier tonight, there's certainly subjectivity to it, but it's based off of largely quantitative factors. And so now if we're, again, I guess that goes back to my uneasiness of voting on these separately is, again, if the desire of the committee is now to shift to more qualitative factors, and certainly there could be merit to that. But again, that changes the conversation. And so again, I'm just going off of what the committee, it seemingly looked like recommended fairly overwhelmingly, that they proposed a largely quantitatively driven scoring system to help us determine whether we are in hybrid or in full person or distance. And again, it seems like that conversation has shifted even in the last 10 or 15 minutes. And again, I guess that's just why I'm highlighting my uneasiness to vote on these independently of each other.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, Christoph. And I wasn't on the call last week because I had a conflict. And I will say, as I meet with colleges that are meeting with MDE and MDH, those groups look to data to help guide because they're trying to make decisions for an entire state, right? And when you're trying to make decisions for an entire state, you use these really broad swaths of, well, the mass data says this, so we should follow what that mass data says. As now I talk to these individual schools, they're leaning on their chief medical personnel on campus to really guide the decisions for that individual campus. And these poor chief medical people on these campuses are also feeling the pressure of the university administrators who are saying, we got to collect tuition checks. So be more liberal than conservative, when we know healthcare professionals are rightfully more conservative, right? They want to protect as much as humanly possible. So I will take some ownership in, one, not being on that call. Two, RST has asked us to take a more qualitative approach. And that's just not what we're seeing from universities that are out there. But the university is doing in return is saying, but we have a plan. It's not based on firm, hard data all the time, but we have a plan and this is what we're moving forward with. Now, those run the gamut as well. And I shared that one of the schools, I think, just told MDH, like, well, we don't really agree with you, but come find us. And by the time you find us, we'll all be vaccinated. So, like I said, this is an emotional thing for everyone because it affects personal safety. And that's why the qualitative piece to me is more important to do the teachers and faculty and everyone on campus feel like we are doing everything we can to make them feel safe. Because it doesn't matter what the data says. If everybody felt safe, you'd be happy coming to work. And that to me is more important than anything else. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, thank you, Drew.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, Christoph, as far as what was presented earlier versus some of the elements that we've heard in the last 10 minutes. It wouldn't be my understanding that we are going to move away from a quantitative approach. And I guess it would be my hope that when we're saying that this committee is going to meet next week, that would still be the approach. Because yes, it would also be a surprise to me if that shift has taken place just during this meeting right now. But I do recognize that some qualitative elements are being added right, when we're looking at that criteria. But I hope that's not at the sacrifice of quantitative measures that are going to be helpful and critical for us to be able to just be knowledgeable about next steps.
I wouldn't say any shift has, I mean, unless I'm wrong, but I wouldn't say any shift has happened in what model is going to be done. This is all just conversations of taking a step back, because whenever you are going to use a policy or a framework to guide a decision, you have to first know like what should go into that decision. You know, is the only factor preventing staff from getting COVID-19, or are there other factors? And then what weight should those factors have? Because I feel like, for example, if Sanker Prep saw, say, 4 students, you know, God forbid, commit suicide, I think our conversations would be very different very fast. But that is the thing that's hard to judge. And that's why you see schools like in Las Vegas shift so quick, because I mean, they have 9-year-old commit suicide. I mean, so I think there hasn't been any sort of official switch or anything, because this is all just conversations. And that's why we're not voting on what that should be, because the big question is what is the question? What is this trying to say we should watch for? Are we trying to prevent spread? I mean, are we trying to make sure nobody ever gets COVID-19? Are we trying to educate students and make sure that they're, you know, happy and safe? Like, what is the goals here? And that should be factored into what guides our decision. Because if the number one most important thing is nobody ever gets COVID, then it doesn't matter what happens to kids. And I don't think that's how anybody feels. And so making sure that whatever guides those decisions really takes in the right things at the right weights is important. But that's what, you know, the work session staff, that's what all that is for, is to figure out what those factors are and what should have that weight.
So I think what Christoph is saying then is to make those decisions that you just outlined, figure those things out before we get cemented into anything. But Drew, to your point, if I'm understanding the motion here tonight, we are talking about formalizing these dates for planning with the understanding that a lot of work has to get done school-wide to make those dates work, right? I mean, as far as getting the school to, you know, work as potentially, you know, multiple schools, even though we're one building, a lot of work is going to have to go into that. So I'm just wanting to make sure what we're voting on here is crystal clear, that a lot has to happen for, I love the idea. I'm an optimist. My students know it. But a lot has to happen for us to make that work. So I just want to make sure we have this, you know, correctly framed as far as what we're voting on tonight.
I think that's fair. I always just feel like I work better when somebody gives me a deadline and I know I got to get all that work done by that deadline, right? If you said that's where we want to go, but you don't give me a deadline, I'm going to wait until you give me one, and then I'll do all the work the night before. So I was not a very good student, though.
Me neither. Don't tell my students.
All right. Did anybody else have any additional questions or comments?
Oh, I was on mute. I did have a comment.
Okay.
I wanted to give you assurance that we have been working to identify how the school can operate as 3 separate buildings. We are aware that no matter how much we do and how well we stay in our areas, that there are portions of the building that cannot be separated. For example, the lower school and the upper school share HVAC systems. And we do have high-end bipolar ionization units, and we have the top MER 13 filters. So that's high quality, but no matter how well we delineate and program, that is inseparable. We have one health room. We have one food service team. We have one kitchen. We have one custodial team. We cross over on many special services, staffing, speech, adaptive FIAD, English language learners. So as much as we can adapt as 3 buildings, there are some things that just aren't adaptable. But I'm focusing on the negative. We are also able to, we do have a plan so that the 5th graders are not intersecting with the 9th graders for those 4 weeks that they're not allowed to cross over and establish themselves in the building safely before they start crossing over. And we have not shared that plan with the team. I have shared it with the board where we're at to date. But...
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Any additional questions or comments?
Well, Kelly, I think that my comment would just be so fair to say that that leads us to some of those contingencies and what probably some of the compromises will be, right? I mean, we may not have gym in the normal way, form, or fashion that we've had gym, realizing that this is temporary, but we would probably make the trade-off of, I'm okay to not have gym in its normal form or fashion if it means I get to come to school 4 or 5 days a week, right? And so we'll ask for parents for grace and understanding when we come to those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and as Wanda Render emphasized today in our meeting, it's very important that parents understand kind of what they're getting into, what they're not getting. So that needs to be laid out as well.
And nobody's taken distance off the table, right?
Right, we're not allowed to. The governor has mandated at this point that we offer distance learning as an option.
So if we don't like the options that we come forward with in the face-to-face, you can choose distance.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Correct.
All right. All right. Additional comments before we put this to vote? And if you do have, speak up, please speak up, because I can only see a few people on my screen, so. All right. All right. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. Christoph? All right. All right. Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you for everyone's input. It's a very good discussion. All right. The next item on our agenda was the special board meeting for February 11th, but I believe we discussed adjusting that to the 16th, a Tuesday instead of a Thursday.
Yep.
All right. And I believe we also were going to discuss the working session for next week on, was that the 11th?
Second.
Second.
I believe?
Second.
Yep. Okay.
February 2nd.
Great. And then did you wish to propose motions for both of those, Kristen, or?
Sure. I'll make a motion. I think hopefully I can have them together. I'll make one. I'll make a motion to do a work session at 6 p.m. Tuesday the 2nd and a special board meeting 6 p.m. Tuesday the 16th of February.
All right.
I'll second.
All right. Great. All right. Further comments or discussion?
This probably isn't part of this motion, but do we know if those would be virtual as well, or are we going to talk about whether we would shift back to meeting in person?
I'd be in support of meeting in person. I mean,
Yep.
kids are back now.
I'm comfortable meeting in person.
In person.
Could work on that at the work session next week and make a plan to do that for the 16th.
So you're suggesting do the work session via Zoom and then discuss meeting in person for the 16th?
I'd be in support of meeting in person for both, especially the work session when we're going to be discussing a lot of stuff. It's hard sometimes with Zoom, with who's talking. And I mean, I would prefer, I don't want anybody to not feel comfortable, but
right.
I'll be wearing a mask.
I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, but I mean, personally, I would prefer meeting in person, at least for the work session. If we had to choose between one of them, I would definitely prefer to meet for the work session in person. But I am flexible with what everyone's comfortable with as well, so. Is anyone totally opposed to meeting in person on the 2nd for the work session?
You could meet in person and give a Zoom option. Is it allowed?
Yeah. All right. And hopefully that's okay with Chad. Not to throw him out there, but I think
we'll make it work.
Okay, great. All right. And so we'll be making a in-person or a Zoom option for both of them, correct?
Does somebody want a Zoom option?
For the 16th?
Yeah. I'm just wondering if Chad, if nobody wants to take advantage of that, then just so he knows. But if somebody does, then
It's possible somebody might be sick or have to be sequestered or quarantined.
Oh, good point. Good point.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good point.
So we can schedule those for in person with the option to check in remotely is totally fine. All right, I am in favor of that. All right, any more discussion on that or comments? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right. And did you have anything else to add, John?
Nope, I think we're good.
That was our last agenda item.
Correct. Yeah, so I think once we have the work sessions and the next meetings in place, I think we can begin our work and get it done.
I will look forward to actually meeting in person, working.
I will too. I will too. So good.
All right. All right, so looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Haj, all right. A second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Chad.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Chad. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
All right, look forward to seeing you all on the 2nd.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.